Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Humaning, where we dive into all the wonderfully complicated ways we do this whole being human thing. I'm Maya, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. If you're new, this little corner of the internet is all about exploring what makes us tick and how we can show up for ourselves and each other just a little bit better. Today, we're talking about something I think we've all experienced, but maybe don't always understand: self-sabotage. Why do we get in our own way, even when we want something so badly? And what can we do about it? As always, I'm joined by Noah. Hey, Noah.
Hey, Maya. Hey, everyone. I'm really excited for this one because honestly, self sabotage is one of those things that seems so simple on the surface, like just stop doing that. But the more you look at it, the more you realize how tangled up it can get with our emotions, our beliefs, even our past experiences. And before we really get into it, just a little quick reminder. If you like what we're doing here, it genuinely helps so much if you hit like, subscribe, or leave a comment. It helps more humans find humaning and keeps us motivated to keep having these conversations. Okay, Maya, so self-sabotage, where do you want to start?
I love that you said it can seem simple, but really isn't. I feel like for me, self-sabotage usually pops up when I'm just about to do something that matters to me. Like, the stakes are high, I care a lot, and suddenly I'm procrastinating or convincing myself I can't do it. It's almost like my brain tries to protect me by keeping me from even trying, which makes no sense. Why do you think we do that, Noah?
That's such a classic example, and I think you hit on a big piece already: the stakes. When something really matters to us, there's so much more risk emotionally. If we fail, it hurts more. So sometimes self sabotage is like this weird backwards way of protecting ourselves from disappointment. If I don't try, or if I kind of mess up on purpose, then I can say, well, I didn't really give it my all, so it doesn't count. It's almost like an escape hatch from vulnerability.
Oh my gosh, yes. That idea of if I don't try, I can't fail. I definitely recognize that in myself. Sometimes I'll procrastinate on something I care about, and then if it doesn't turn out perfectly, I can blame the lack of time instead of actually confronting the fear that maybe I'm not good enough. It's so sneaky. Have you ever done something like that?
Oh, absolutely. I remember in college, I had this big paper due for a class I really wanted to do well in. I kept putting it off, and then the night before, I was scrambling. And of course, the paper wasn't as good as it could have been, but it was almost a relief. I could tell myself if I'd started earlier, it would have been great. But deep down, I was just really scared I'd try my hardest and still not measure up. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Totally. And I think we don't always recognize it as fear. Sometimes it shows up as perfectionism, or I'm just too busy, or I work better under pressure. But underneath, there's that anxiety about what it would mean if we gave it our best and still didn't succeed. It's almost like we're protecting our sense of self-worth.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just about procrastination either. Self sabotage can show up in relationships too. Like, have you ever found yourself picking a fight or pulling away from someone just when things are going really well?
Oh, wow. Yes. That's a vulnerable one. I've definitely noticed that in myself. Sometimes if I'm starting to get close to someone, I'll get anxious and start looking for reasons it won't work out. Or I'll withdraw. It's like some part of me is afraid of being seen, or afraid that if I really let someone in, I'll get hurt. So I kind of sabotage the connection before they have a chance to leave me. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. I think it's really common. And what's wild is logically, we know we want connection, but those old emotional patterns or fears can take over. It's almost like the brain is trying to keep us safe based on past experiences, even if those strategies don't actually serve us anymore.
That's such a good point. I guess it comes back to that idea of protective behaviors that might have made sense at some point in our lives, but now just keep us stuck. I think about how childhood experiences, like if you got criticized a lot or felt like you could never quite measure up, those can plant seeds that grow into self-sabotage as an adult.
Definitely. There's actually research showing that self sabotage can be linked to self esteem and early attachment patterns. If you grew up feeling like you had to be perfect to be loved, or if you never felt quite safe or accepted, you might internalize the belief that you're not worthy of success or happiness. And then when opportunities come up, that old voice kicks in and tries to prove you right by messing things up.
Right. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that's why it can be so hard to break the cycle, because it's not just a behavior, it's tied to these deep beliefs about ourselves. I'm curious, Noah, what do you think helps people start to notice or shift these patterns?
That's such a good question. I think awareness is huge. Just starting to notice when you're self sabotaging is a big first step. Like, oh, I'm procrastinating right now. What am I actually feeling? Or why did I pick that fight with my partner when things were going well? Sometimes just pausing and getting curious about your own behavior can open up a little space to respond differently.
Yes, curiosity instead of judgment. That's so important. I've found that if I can catch myself in the moment, like, oh, I see what's happening, I'm scared, then I can practice being gentle with myself instead of shaming myself for doing it again. It's almost like I have to parent that scared part of me a little bit.
I love that metaphor, parenting the scared part of yourself. Because honestly, a lot of self sabotage comes from those younger parts of us that didn't get what they needed. So instead of beating ourselves up, we can try to be compassionate and maybe even ask, what am I trying to protect myself from right now? Is there a safer way to get my needs met?
That's beautiful. And I think sometimes it helps to talk to someone about it, whether that's a friend, a therapist, or even journaling. Just saying the thing out loud can make it less scary. I know for me, when I admit to someone, hey, I'm kind of freaking out about this and I keep putting it off, it loosens the grip a little bit.
Absolutely. There's so much power in naming things. And sometimes just realizing, oh, this is self sabotage, not a personal failing, can be really freeing. It's not that you're lazy or bad or broken, it's just a pattern you learned, and patterns can be changed.
Yes. And maybe it's worth mentioning that self-sabotage isn't always obvious or dramatic either. Sometimes it's really subtle, like choosing to stay comfortable instead of taking a risk, or not speaking up in a meeting because you're afraid of looking foolish. Do you have any examples of the more quiet ways we might self-sabotage?
Oh, for sure. One that comes to mind is when people say yes to things they don't actually want to do because they're afraid of disappointing others. It can be a kind of self sabotage because you end up stretched too thin or resentful, or you don't have time for your own goals. Another one is all or nothing thinking, like if I can't do this perfectly, I won't do it at all. That can keep people stuck and prevent them from even starting.
That's so true. I think sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it. We just feel frustrated or stuck, and we don't connect it to self-sabotage. It makes me think about how important self-awareness is, but also how hard it can be to see our own blind spots.
Yeah, we're often so close to our own patterns that we can't see them clearly. That's why feedback from other people, or even just talking things through out loud, can be so helpful. Sometimes a friend will point out, hey, I noticed you always seem to pull back right when things are going well. And it's like, oh, wow, I never noticed that before.
Exactly. And I think sometimes we can even invite that kind of reflection from people we trust. Like, hey, do you ever notice me getting in my own way? It's vulnerable, but it can be really eye-opening. And it's also a chance to practice self-compassion. Because, like you said earlier, these patterns usually come from a place of wanting to stay safe.
Yeah. And I think as we get better at recognizing our own self sabotage, We can also start to experiment with small changes. Like maybe you try breaking a big task into tiny steps, or you practice saying no once in a while, or you let yourself do something imperfectly on purpose. It takes practice, but over time, it does get easier.
I love that idea, starting small. I think sometimes we expect ourselves to just fix these patterns overnight, but it's really about building new habits, little by little, and celebrating the tiny wins too. Like, hey, I spoke up in that meeting, even though it was scary. Or, I noticed myself wanting to procrastinate, and I took one small step instead.
Yes, I think it's really important to acknowledge progress, even if it feels minor, because every time we choose something different, we're rewiring those old patterns, and eventually, self sabotage loses a bit of its power.
That's so encouraging, Noah. Before we wrap up, I'm curious, do you have a personal mantra or reminder that helps you when you notice yourself slipping into self-sabotage?
Good question. I think for me, it's something like progress, not perfection. Reminding myself that it's okay to be messy and that trying, even imperfectly, is better than not trying at all. What about you?
I love that. For me, it's probably, I can do hard things even if I'm scared. Just giving myself permission to feel the fear and take the step anyway. It doesn't have to be perfect, I just have to show up.
You know, Maya, something you said earlier really stuck with me that self sabotage isn't always dramatic or even intentional. I'm curious, have you ever caught yourself doing something that just seemed like a small, harmless habit, but then later realized it was actually keeping you from what you wanted?
Oh, totally. Actually, I think one of my sneakiest self-sabotage patterns is overcommitting. Like, I'll say yes to every invitation, every work project, every favor for a friend. And on the surface, it looks like, wow, Maya is so helpful and productive. But what's really happening is that I'm crowding out time for my own goals, like writing or just taking care of myself. It took me a long time to see that as self-sabotage because it felt so nice, you know? But in reality, I was avoiding my own stuff because I was scared of facing it.
That makes so much sense. I feel like there's this cultural pressure too to be busy all the time, so it's almost rewarded. But underneath, it's like a shield. You don't have to face the uncomfortable stuff if you're always running around helping everyone else.
Exactly. It's like, look how useful I am. Don't look at the stuff I'm afraid to try. And the hard part is sometimes people even praise you for it, so it gets reinforced. But at the end of the day, I'd feel exhausted and unfulfilled because I wasn't moving toward the things that really mattered to me.
That's so real. And I think a lot of people are going to relate to that. For me, sometimes my self sabotage shows up as analysis paralysis. Like I want to make the perfect decision. So I just research and plan and think and never actually act. It feels productive. I'm preparing. But really, it's a way to avoid the risk of making the wrong choice.
Oh, yes, I know that one well. There's something comforting about being in the planning phase forever. But at some point, you have to leap, right? How do you catch yourself when you're stuck in that loop?
Honestly, it's still a work in progress, but I try to set little deadlines for myself, like I'll research until Thursday. Then I have to take some kind of action, even if it's small. And I remind myself that most decisions aren't actually permanent. If I try something and it doesn't work, I can adjust. It's just hard to remember that in the moment.
That's a great strategy. I've started doing something similar, like setting a timer and just starting, even if I don't feel ready. Sometimes, once I get going, the anxiety eases up a bit, and even if it's messy, I've at least broken through that initial wall.
That's such an important point. The hardest part is often just starting. And I think what we're talking about is really building a kind of trust with ourselves. Like I can handle whatever happens, even if it's not perfect.
Yes, self-trust is huge, and I think it grows when we show up for ourselves, even in small ways. Like every time I set a boundary or start a project I've been avoiding, It's like I'm telling myself, you're worth this effort. You're allowed to try, even if it's scary. It's really empowering.
Absolutely. And I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the connection between self sabotage and self worth. I think so many of us learned, consciously or unconsciously, that we had to earn our worth through achievement or making other people happy. And then when we're faced with our own hopes or dreams, it's like, who am I to want this? What if I don't deserve it?
That's so true. I think sometimes the roots of self sabotage are in those old stories we tell ourselves. Maybe someone told us, don't get your hopes up, or people like us don't do things like that. And even if we don't believe those things anymore, they linger in the background.
Yeah, those messages are sticky. But the beautiful thing is that we can start to change them bit by bit. Like just noticing, oh, wow, I'm telling myself that story again and gently challenging it. I know for me, sometimes I'll actually write down the old belief and then write a new, kinder one next to it. It sounds cheesy, but it really helps.
I love that. I do something similar. I'll write a letter to myself from the perspective of a supportive friend. Like, hey, it's okay to want what you want. You deserve to try. It's safe to hope. Sometimes giving myself that external validation, even if it's just in my own handwriting, makes a difference.
That's so powerful. And I think it's a good reminder for everyone listening that you don't have to do this work alone. Whether it's supportive friends, a therapist, or even just communities like this one, there are people who get it and want to cheer you on.
Definitely. And even just listening to conversations like this, I hope, helps people feel less alone. Because self sabotage thrives in secrecy and shame. The more we can talk about it openly, the less power it has.
Exactly. And I think when we see that everyone struggles with this stuff, even people who seem super confident, it normalizes it. Like, oh, it's not just me. I'm not broken. It's just a part of being human.
Yes, and speaking of being human, I want to ask, do you think there are any upsides to self sabotage? Like, does it ever teach us something or show us something important?
That's a fascinating question. I think sometimes self sabotage is a signal that we have unmet needs or unhealed wounds. It can actually point us toward the places that need attention or compassion. For example, if I keep sabotaging relationships, maybe there's some grief or fear I haven't processed yet. It's not about blaming myself, but getting curious. What's underneath this?
I love that. It's like our behavior is a messenger, not an enemy. And sometimes self sabotage is just a sign that we're growing. Like, we're reaching for something new. And that's always going to stir up resistance.
Yes. There's a quote I love. I think it's from Stephen Pressfield about how resistance is greatest when we're on the edge of something meaningful. So if you notice yourself self sabotaging, it might actually mean you're on the right track.
That's such a reframe. Instead of seeing it as proof that we're failing, we can see it as proof that we care. And maybe that's the moment to get extra gentle with ourselves rather than doubling down on self criticism.
Absolutely. Kindness is key. And, I'd love to hear from people listening. What are some ways you've noticed self sabotage showing up in your life and what helps you move through it? Feel free to drop a comment or send us a message. We really do read them, and it's so inspiring to see how everyone is working through these things in their own way.
Yes, please share. I always learn so much from our community. And Noah, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to touch on? Any final thoughts for people who are maybe feeling stuck in a self-sabotage loop right now?
Hmm. I think I just want to say be patient with yourself. Change is slow and non-linear. You might take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that's okay. Every time you notice a pattern or try something different, you're making progress, and you really don't have to do it perfectly.
I love that. And I'd add, try to celebrate your courage, even if it's just for noticing what's happening. That awareness is a huge act of bravery. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all learning together.
So true. And just one more gentle nudge. If you found this episode meaningful, or if you want to support more conversations like this, it genuinely helps if you like, subscribe, and share the podcast. It makes a big difference for us and helps us grow this beautiful community of humans.
Yes, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. We really appreciate you being part of Humaning. And I hope you leave this episode feeling a little more seen, and maybe even a little more hopeful.
Couldn't have said it better. Take care of yourselves, be kind to those scared parts inside, and just keep showing up. We'll be back next week with more honest conversations. Until then, be well.
Thanks again, everyone. Wishing you a gentle, courageous week ahead. Bye for now.
Bye.